Okay. There's one more part in this Mamar Mah Tovu that in this booklet rather that I want to cover, and that's a Mamar from the Rebbe that explains a little bit more clearly the difference between things that are not permissible, treif, and an nisayon. Remember, we said in class that things that are not kosher, let's say food that's not kosher. So even though it's not kosher, but it's not aggressively opposing godliness in any way. It's sitting there quietly, a not kosher piece of meat on the counter, but it's not bothering anybody. And the nisayon is a force that's confronting me, that's attacking me, that's pulling me away from learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, or a force that's pushing me to do something which I'm not allowed to do. So there's something which is aggressively opposing Yiddishkeit, right? Here we're going to learn something, a little small piece from the Rebbe's Maimer that adds another bit of an explanation of the difference between a nisayon and other things that are also not kosher, but it's not a nisayon. Remember, we did say that if a person finds that that they want the food, something, they feel a very strong attraction to something which is not kosher in food, so that is a nisayon. The fact that they feel that strong attraction, that's a nisayon. In fact, there's a famous story that is told about a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. That, chassidim always have a farbrengen. And what's a farbrengen? Farbrengen is someone speaks words of Torah, thoughts about chassidus, thoughts about how we can work on self-improvement. And of course, they sing nigunim, but it also goes together with saying l'chaim. And when you say l'chaim, you need something to eat. You can't just drink vodka without eating something. So what's the something? They call it a chaser. You take a piece of pickle, you take a piece of a herring, you take a piece of something. So one time the chassidim had a farbrengen, and they went to the butcher, and he took a piece of meat, and that's what they felt, that's what they were planning to eat by the farbrengen. So there was a chassid there, his name was Shmuel Munkes. He was a famous chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And one of the reasons that made him so famous was because he was very unique in his style. He would do a lot of things which were mischievous, which were humorous, gave the impression that he's just some sort of a clown. But in reality, he was a very big chassid hiding his greatness. So this is one of those stories that they sat down to have the farbrengen. And naturally, by farbrengen, someone has the bottle in his hand and he distributes l'chaim to everybody. Someone else will have the cake or whatever it is, and he'll distribute that to everybody. He had the meat. And when people asked for a piece of meat, he wouldn't give it to them. So why don't you give me the meat? Why don't you give us the meat? They said, no. And everybody's asking, why don't you give us the meat? Why don't you give us the meat? Why don't you give us the meat? And finally somebody gets up and wants to grab the meat, so he runs away. So they start racing after him. It sounds like kids, but this is what was going on by farbrengen. When he saw that they're catching up to him, he took the meat and threw it into the toilet. Everybody was shocked. Like, I mean, they know already that he had those things that are wild and mischief, but this is actually an avera to waste a piece of meat. Before they had a chance to really criticize him for what he just did, the wife of the butcher came running, and she's has her hands on her head and screaming, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't realize what happened. So by mistake, I gave you a piece of treif meat." Oh, now they backed off. Oh, he's not just a mischief. Obviously, he knew that the meat was treif. So Hasidim always very cautious with not having too much ego. So they started like, oh yeah, Ruach HaKodesh, or some sort of a prophet, they were trying to play it down a little bit. But he said to them, I'm not a prophet, I'm not a son of a prophet, but I saw one thing. I saw that everybody has this desire for the food. This food is like has an attraction, which is a little bit out of the ordinary. And that's Shalosh Klipas Atmayas. Klipas Noga doesn't have such a strong attraction. Something which is treif has a much stronger attraction. When I saw that everybody is so much into getting this piece of meat, I knew there must be something wrong. That was either that was an excuse, or but anyway, the concept itself is still a concept. So here in this part of the Maimon, the Rebbe explains more clearly. There's another point that makes the distinction between something that's treif and an asoyin. Why an asoyin is lower than other things that are treif. So turn to the page 42 in the booklet. This is a Maimon from the Rebbe also that talks about the subject of Nisayan, and pretty much similar to what it says here. But like I told you, was every Maimon, every Rebbe has something that's new and different that wasn't said before, that's being added. And here's one of the things in the Rebbe's Maimon, the part that's underlined on page 42. Even though things that are not kosher, and by abstaining from them, we're observing a negative commandment, which means we're observing the mitzvah of not doing it or not eating it, whether it be chametz on Pesach, whether it would be eating treif meat, whether it be doing something else which is not kosher. Hey minyanim shel klipa, mikol mokim. Nevertheless, ein hechrech leimar. There's no reason to say that to say that the entire being of this object is against kedusha. For example, there are animals that are not kosher. A horse is not kosher. A donkey is not kosher. Well, we can't say that this animal is totally against kedusha. Why not? The proof is sheyeshnam kama inyanim. There's so many things shasurim b'achila. They are prohibited from being eaten, but but you can have other kind of pleasure from it. So like a horse or a donkey is klipa, so it's treif. How come Avraham Avinu was riding on a donkey? How will Mashiach come riding on a donkey? How come Moshe was riding on a donkey? Because there's no prohibition on riding on a donkey. There's only a prohibition on eating the meat of a donkey or eating the meat of a horse. And so too with many other things. So that must be an area that means that when I'm using this animal in a positive way, I'm also elevating something in the animal. And by doing that, I can elevate it to some degree to kedusha. So therefore, there are certain things that actually that a person needs them for their benefit. Like we said before, in the olden days they didn't have cars and they had donkeys and they had horses, and that's how they traveled. So they needed them. How could it be that something which is total klipa? So we see clearly from them that they're not total klipa. There's a part of it which is also kedusha. So there are many levels. In other words, we don't have the glasses and the technology to look into the object and see what kind of klip is it, how much of a klip it is. But we know the halacha. The fact that there are differences in halacha, let's say there's certain things in halacha which you're not allowed to eat, but you could have benefit. There's certain things in halacha you can't even have any benefit. There's certain things that you can do this, but you can't do that. All these differences in halacha are a result of the differences of how much they are permeated with klipa. So that means that there's certain aspects of them, they're not really opponents to Hashem's will, b'chol in your name, or b'chol prateim. That we can't say that in all their details they are against Hashem. We say to them is something more, we can go even a step further. There are times, gam hadavar isur atzma, even something which is actually usur, to be eaten, nasa heter, could be made permissible to be eaten. This is similar to what our sages say. This would be an example. The Be'esh Kibush Haaretz, when Yeshua conquered the land of Eretz Yisrael, and really it applies to that war and other wars as well. In a time of war, there's certain things that are permissible because that's what's necessary to fight the war. And fighting a war is a matter of pikuach nefesh, of saving lives. If God forbid the Yidden are defeated, there'll be a loss of life. If Yidden are victorious, they'll be able to save lives. So because of that, certain things were made permissible. It was permitted for them to even eat things that were connected to chazir, to pork. When you eat it, actually it becomes part of your flesh and blood. It's not like other things that it doesn't become part of you. If a person, let's say, desecrates Shabbos, there's nothing here that becomes part of me. But if I eat food that's not kosher, it becomes part of me, and to a certain extent, it's there forever. How could I put into my body something which is klipa? And not only that, the energy that we get, or that those people got in that generation from eating this not kosher food, that with that energy they would conquer the land of Eretz Yisrael, which is a positive thing. In other words, it has to be that, because if I would say that it didn't contribute to their health, they wouldn't be allowed to eat it. So obviously the reason they're allowed to eat it because that gave them energy, because obviously there wasn't other meat available, and therefore they were permitted to do this in order to conquer the land. As it's explained in the Sifri Pashtarim, the people who explain the Pshat, simple meaning. Hainu, this means that not only we find that things that are treif have an aspect in it which is kosher, and not only we find that there's certain aspects which are kosher and I can elevate it, but there's certain aspects in it which will actually enhance my serving Hashem, and it's an object that's not kosher. In fact, the same would apply. The Rebbe doesn't bring it here, but I think it's brought down maybe some other places, definitely brought down. And that is, what about a person who is, God forbid, sick, serious illness, and the only thing that he can eat that would cure him is a certain medicine, a certain food that's actually treif. So not only is he allowed to, he's obligated to, he has to be obligated to save his life. So there's a question, what does that mean? Does it mean the Torah says you can eat treif, or it becomes permissible to him then? And halach is, it's like something which is permissible. So here's an object that's treif, and yet I can use it to eat it, which means that some way I can elevate it. If I can elevate it, and if this enhances my serving Hashem, it must be that it has some aspect of godliness in it. That's things that are treif. But a nisayon is different. A nisayon, the entire essence of this nisayon is all about opposing godliness and aggressively fighting godliness and stopping godliness from being spread into the world. Mashen came bin nisyonis. But when we're talking about a nisayon, what is a nisayon? Shemitziusam, this is what defines their essence. Shehumad davar lahalim b'lemnoya avedis Hashem. There's something standing there that blocks me from serving Hashem. That's what's all about. If not for the fact that it's blocking me from serving Hashem, it has no substance altogether. I feel it's even something that can't even be sort of a part of my imagination. It doesn't exist. The entire mitzias is that it makes me think that I can't do this mitzvah or that mitzvah. And therefore, nisayon is so much lower than other things that are treif. And being that a nisayon fell so much lower, it fell its entire being is rak l'nagid ratzon Hashem. It's only and exclusively to go against Hashem's will. So it's not like other things that are not kosher, that they have other aspects to them and they have another purpose to it, which is actually positive. So this treif animal has another purpose to it, and that treif animal has its purpose. And the same with all the treif animals, and the same with other things that are not kosher. They have a purpose in a different area. But a nisayon its entire essence is all about something which blocks me from serving Hashem. They move on, so it's understood. So like we said the other day, if a person has a fear to do a mitzvah, because I'm afraid if I do this mitzvah, people make fun of me, that fear and that feeling and that thought is not a really true substance. It's only there to test me. It's only there that I should overcome it and show that it's all from Hashem. And once I do that, it disappears. I saw a letter from the Rebbe where someone writes, years ago, this was in the 1950s, that he started Chabad activities in his city, and there's somebody there who's actually a Torah observant Jew, but doesn't like Chabad, and he's interfering with everything that he tries to do. He's asking the Rebbe for advice. The Rebbe says the only reason why that person could succeed is because you're giving him too much substance. If you would just not give him any substance, just forget about it, just do what you have to do, you'll see that all his opposition will just melt away. Then the Rebbe told the story. The Rebbe tells a story. So the Alter Rebbe, when he was arrested, before Yutas Kistel will go through the story in class, but one part of the story was that after he got out of jail, the guards made a mistake. Apparently, protocol in Russia was, or the prison, was that when a prisoner is freed, the guards have to bring him to his house. So they escorted the Alter Rebbe, where he didn't live in Petersburg, so they brought him to the house of a chassid. In that building where this chassid lived another person who actually belonged to the other camp. Not only other camp, apparently he was even involved in getting the Alter Rebbe arrested in the first place. One lived upstairs and one lived downstairs. So they made a mistake. They brought him to the wrong house. When that person opened the door and they walked in, he closed the door and they held the Alter Rebbe hostage there for 3 hours. And there's a lot to talk about what happened in those 3 hours. And the Hasidim were totally confused. They go to the prison, they say, we released him already. They go to the house, he never arrived there. They didn't know where he was until they heard voices coming from the voices coming from that apartment, and they realized from the screaming that this person is screaming at the Alter Rebbe, and that's when they stormed the house. He wouldn't open the door, so they told him, if you don't open the door within the next few seconds, the door will be gone. He opened the door. They walked in, the Alter Rebbe was sitting like this, and apparently the Alter Rebbe said that these 3 hours, listening to his abusive language against the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe said, I suffered more in these 3 hours than all my 53 days in the Russian jail. Then the Alter Rebbe said something very interesting. It says 10 Kavod Afsanya. You're supposed to honor your host. Well, he was my host for the last 3 hours, so I'll drink a cup of tea. And the person went and he poured a cup of tea for the Alter Rebbe, and then they left. On one hand, it's a beautiful thing. The Rebbe writes that later years, the Alter Rebbe says he regrets that he drank the cup of tea, because by drinking that cup of tea, on one hand, it means you're showing that even though you tortured me, I still love you, obviously so. But on the other hand, it gave that person who was an opponent too much substance. I shouldn't have done that. So basically, not because of Chas v'Shalom, because I hate you. No, Alter Rebbe never had any feelings of hate towards any other Jew. But he meant to say that this gave this person interpreted about that to give them, like I told you many times, this is like what's going on in Eretz Yisrael with the Arabs, with the Hamas, that when you're dealing with terrorists, no matter what you do, the mere fact that you sit down by a table to negotiate with them and work out a deal, that's giving them substance. When you give them substance, they only become stronger, as we see. Over the years, can't even compare where these terrorists were holding 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, what the demands were, and what the demands are now. Because the more things were given into them, the stronger they became. So, same as with our own Yitzhahara, not to give them substance. If it's so low, so their source is so much higher, and therefore they Avedis and Nisyonis, through nisyanis, which is the lowest level, the person is also raised to the highest level. Okay, so I want to just briefly, I really would have liked to have this in writing, but it didn't work out. Maybe a little bit later, but Baruch Hashem, there's always something going on that does not let me do it. But let me go over briefly these two Mamar that we just learned. Every Mamar is saying something which is different than, and something new that we didn't have in the previous Mamar. We're starting with the first Mamar of the Alter Rebbe, the one from the Kuti Torah. Oh, it would be nice if one of you would write this down and make a little essay. I would appreciate it, but I tried it. The other Mamar didn't work. Maybe this time it'll work. Let's go over a little bit what is the first Mamar, the Alter Rebbe on the pasuk Achrei Havai Lekechem Tolechu. That's where the Alter Rebbe explains that the idea that why does Hashem make an assignment in the first place? Like I told you, this is the first Mamar from the first Rebbe. So this is sort of the origin of this idea that the purpose of an assignment is not for Hashem to know how loyal I am and how dedicated I am, but it's to give me knowledge of Hashem, das. Then he explains what is das. That das means not only to know Hashem, but the kind of knowledge that comes that's so real and so much part of my reality, like things that I can actually see with my physical eyes. That's number one. The second thing he explains here, this is what the Rebbe said here, but here again the origin is here, that because an Nisayan is so low, and it's actually lower than the spark of godliness in trade foods, first of all, it's lower than the spark of godliness in food in general. But now the Rebbe says because it fell lower, that means it comes from a higher source. And that when I stand up to the test, I'm extracting that spark of godliness, which means I'm revealing it, I'm removing the concealment. And as a result of that, I absorb it. It penetrates my neshama. And therefore I can rise to a higher level, which is to have das in Hashem. I would say this is what it says in this Mamar, these few points that I just mentioned. Maybe I should list them. Point number one is why Hashem makes an assignment. Point number two is that we gain das and explains what das is. Point number three is to explain that an assignment is lower than other things that are not kosher, because it's lower, it has a source which is higher. Point number four is that therefore when I stand up to the test and elevate that spark will enhance my service to Hashem. In what way? That explains how I can have more das by standing up to the Messiah. And then he says something briefly, and that is like the mashal of the Father and the Son. So here we have the Mamar from the Mittel Rebbe that explains the mashal in detail. So that's the second Mamar. The Mamar from the Mittel Rebbe is brought mainly to give the mashal of the Father and the Son and the whole scenario that the Father hides from the Son, and he's testing two things. One is how intelligent the Son is. Will he realize that this is just a test? The Father is just doing it to test him, not Chas v'Shalom abandoning him. And the second thing is, even if he doesn't have the intelligence, but if he's really connected in the depth of his heart, he'll feel that his Father's heart is still with him. And if he gives up, that means his connection is not 100%, and therefore he doesn't feel his Father's connection. Same thing with us and Hashem. So again, an Asai means Hashem is hiding, but the purpose of the hiding is that we should find him, and not the opposite. I always think of this scenario which we observe as we're raising our children. And then if you're a babysitter, you'll probably come up with it too. But a little baby, a 1-year-old, has in their hand, I mean, I've seen this, I'm giving you this as a mashal. We'll elevate the bottle of milk through this mushroom. So the baby's holding a bottle of milk, not a bottle of milk, a bottle that had milk in it before. So there's no milk in there now, but it's all filled with whatever's left over from the milk, right? And the baby's crying, I want milk. What does the mother do? Takes the bottle away to wash it, to clean it, and to put in new fresh milk. As the mother takes away the bottle, the baby gets hysterical. You're taking away my bottle. I'm begging you for milk. And the baby doesn't speak. You're taking me for milk. Why are you taking away the bottle? After a while, after a few days, a few weeks, when the mother takes the bottle away, the baby starts dancing and all excited because he knows the mother's giving him milk. What changed? Because before, the baby interpreted that you're taking it away from me and you're not giving me what I'm asking for. Now the baby understands, I'm not taking anything away. I'm taking it away to fill it up with new, fresh milk. When Hashem hides from us, he's not hiding because he's abandoning us. He's hiding from us because he wants us to find him. And he knows that by us finding him, his love for us will be even greater than before. And our love for him will be greater than before. So basically to understand that every concealment is only to raise us higher and have a higher level of Avodas Hashem. Okay, what's the third mimer? The third mimer was from the Tzemach Tzedek. And what's in that mimer that's new? The idea that there are 5 kinds of tests. We didn't have that in the Alter Rebbe's mimer. We didn't have that in the Mittler Rebbe's mimer. But that's in the Tzemach Tzedek's mimer. And what are the 5 tests? One test is to see how far out I'll go to do a positive commandment. Another test is to see how strong I'll be able to conquer my temptation not to do a negative commandment. These are 2. Then there's another 2. One test to see how loyal I'll be to Hashem even after he gives me an abundance of blessings and money and good health and happiness and everything. Will I still be loyal to him, or that'll cause me to become more arrogant and distant from him? And the other side would be the opposite. How will I act if Chas v'Shalom, they're suffering? Will I still be loyal to Hashem? Like I told you, these are 2 things, but it's like 2 sets. One is positive, one is negative in terms of mitzvahs, and one is positive, and one is negative in terms of my life. The 5th category is a test in faith. Like a person who's a false prophet comes along, performs miracles, tells us wonderful things, and then he says that he got a message from Hashem that we should do an Aveira, and God forbid worship idols and do other things that you're not allowed to do. And anything else that is a test in our faith. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, when he took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, and then he said, I'm coming back. And he didn't come back. When they thought he was supposed to come back, because they didn't believe he was coming back, they went and made a golden calf. That was a test in faith.
What did you say?
The first one, testing how far I'll go to do a mitzvah saseh. How much money I'm ready to spend, how far I'm ready to walk, how much I'm ready to go out of my way to do a mitzvah. The other one is how strong I'll be to hold back my Yetzer Hara not to do an Aveira. And this mimer, we also, towards the end of the booklet, we brought a mimer from the Rebbe that said that in our generation, the big nisayon is al yizbayish b'nei haligim, not to be intimidated, not to be embarrassed because of people that laugh at me and people that ridicule my Torah mitzvahs. And that's, the Rebbe said, that's sort of a test that's specifically and mainly in this last generation. That was in the first booklet. Now let's go to the Mamar Mah Tovu. So these are all different points. Some are brought out in the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, some are brought out in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, some in Tzemach Tzedek's Maimer, and some in the Rebbe's Maimer. In the Mamar Mah Tovu, I'm not going to talk about other details, but mainly about the Nisayon part. As we explained, that the word Nisayon also comes from Hebrew. The Hebrew grammar, Nisayon means something which is high. which gives us insight, the idea that the purpose of an Nisayan is to make us higher. Here he adds what it says in the Alter Rebbe's Maimon, that through an Nisayan we have Das. He has a new concept, not just Das. We have Das in Havaya, in God, in Hashem, how He is above nature. The fact that you have Das and understanding godliness in general is already an amazing thing. But to have that kind of Das in Hashem, how He is above nature, which means even people who believe that Hashem could perform a miracle, it's still something sort of distant. It's not the same reality like other things. But Das means that not only I know and I learn and I believe, but it's in a way of Das, as if I see it, that Hashem is not limited by any laws of nature, and therefore this is the person who has a higher level of understanding Hashem. Then he goes into the wanted to say something? Then into the Nisayan. I would say the main thing here is the difference between the spark of godliness in food and how we elevate the spark of godliness in the Nisayan. This was not found in a previous Maimon. That the spark of godliness in food, not only food, any object, spark of godliness in clothing, the spark of godliness in furniture, spark of godliness in a home, in an apartment, the spark of godliness in any object of the world, the way to elevate is by engaging with it. The spark of godliness in the Nisayan, the way to elevate is by disengaging from it, by dismissing it, by ignoring it. Yeah.
But that only applies to the ones that's like the tests that talk about not doing negative mitzvahs. But like how far you'll go to do a positive mitzvah, you do have to engage in it.
No, you don't engage in that thought or that pull that's telling me not to do it. For example, it's Shabbos or it's Yom Tov. Well, let's say I'm buying a mezuzah. I walk into the store, it says, you get a mezuzah that's borderline kosher for $50. You can get a mezuzah that's really a mehudra mezuzah that costs $100.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
by not getting the other thing.
Right, so there's a thought that comes to my head, $100 in mezuzah, pay extra $50. Mezuzah was the big deal. Any thought that comes to my head that tells me not to go out of my way of spending that money extra, again, not always, sometimes I can't spend that kind of, I'm talking about a person, let's say, who's a person of means. When it comes to buy a door handle, he'll also buy the $300 door handle because that's more beautiful. When it comes to buy other things, he can spend all the money. Going on vacations, he can spend the money. Buying a mezuzah, suddenly I can't have the extra $50. Mm-hmm. So that thought is a thought they have to ignore and just say, this is the right thing to do. You have a mitzvah, do it the beautiful way, not beautiful. The second thing that he says in this Maimon about the difference is that when it comes to other inyanim of avodas Hashem, is by thinking, by meditating, using my head and my heart. When it comes to Nisayan, it's not using my head and my heart. In fact, there should be no dialogue. There should be no questions and answers in my head. I just have to do it. And for this, we need to bring out the yechida, the force that comes from the essence of the neshama. I guess that these are 2 points. Number one, the approach. The approach is not the dialogue. In other words, if I have a reason in my head to do the Avera, and then I answer myself that I shouldn't do it because of this, then I say, but maybe I should because of that, and maybe I shouldn't because of the other thing. All these dialogues, now, not when it comes to Messiah. When it comes to other things, like how do I develop love for Hashem, there has to be a thought process, a question, an answer. How do I understand it better? How do I explain it? But when it comes to Nisayan, I have to tell myself, just do what has to be done. Do not allow any dialogue in your head. So, I don't know where we're up to by now. Somebody's counting. This is point number 8, number 9. But then the next point is what we just learned in the Rebbe's Maimer. Where's the difference between things that are treif and in the soyin? So besides the fact, which by the way, that's also some Tzedek's Maimer. Some Tzedek's Maimer says that things that are treif don't. It's not something which is opposing aggressively godliness, and but in the soyin does. And the Rebbe's Maimer in this book brings a new point that things that are treif are not completely klipa. There's aspects in it that are permissible, and sometimes aspects in it that are not only permissible, but it's advisable to do it and it's necessary to do it. And that's because it's not totally klipa. We can't say that its entire essence is all about opposing godliness. There's a part of his essence which is also to enhance godliness. Mashenkin in the Sayin is something which its entire essence from A to Z, it's all about one thing, opposing God. Otherwise, it has no substance other than that. Now we have to get some feedback from being out there in the field. It's like, what happens when there's an assignment? Everybody has their own personal assignment. You have to think how to apply everything we learned here for my assignment. What to say to myself, how to be strong, how not to fail in the assignment, and so on. Oops, I forgot another one. We have a Rashab. That's the whole thing with the Maimer that we learned in Samach Vav. That the way to understand the Indian of an assignment is like the mushal of a teacher and a student. That we didn't have in any other Maimer. That it's like a Rav and a Talmud. That the Rav conceals the concept and the depth of it, so the Talmud could receive it. Otherwise, he would just be confused. So in that case, we understand that even though on the surface it looks like a concealment, in reality, it's not only it's not a concealment, it's actually the opposite, is the teacher choosing to reveal the concept to the student. But the only way he could reveal it is by concealing it first, and then slowly but surely they can understand the depth of the concept. The same thing is with Havaya and Elokim. Hashem's light is infinite, and this world cannot absorb, cannot contain infinite light. So Hashem hides his infinite light through nature. That's why everything has to be in a natural order. So if Hashem wants someone to make money and make a lot of money, there'll be a natural reason how they made that money. But that's not the reason. That's just the garment. The real reason is because Shem Havaya is giving this person money. And the natural reason is just to conceal that it shouldn't be open godliness, because that's not what the world is all about. And the same with the Nisayan, that things appear to be blocking Hashem, that's on the outside. And the reason is because Hashem wants to give me something which is actually beyond nature. So therefore, in the natural way, it looks like I can't do this mitzvah. But the reality is that I could, and if I stand up to the test, this light of Hashem that's beyond nature will be revealed. So in fact, one example of that would be a person takes time off for learning, takes time off for davening, and a person takes from his money, gives away a lot of tzedakah. On the surface, sort of following the natural order, it looks like that will only sort of hold him back from really making a lot of money. If at the end of the day he's actually making more money and he's growing in his business, that's where he sort of sees a manifestation of that infinite light. That really this is just appeared that way. But like the story that I told you with this politician, well, because he kept the laws of tznius, not only didn't lose his elections, actually as a result of that, he won in the election, which means that the fact that he did the mitzvah, which on the surface looked like this is something which will alienate people from voting for him, actually that was the reason why people voted for him. So when you see that, you're seeing godliness in a revealed way. Okay, yeah.
So I remember reading what is the Rebbe's opinion? Like we have our own test and we hear about somebody and we see that they seem to be facing a test. What, you know,
What can I do about it?
yeah, I mean, is it invasive to take some, you know, what is the guidance?
Well, the answer to that is that it really depends on who the person is, what's my relationship with that person, and more than anything else, to try to make an assessment. Will they appreciate that I'm saying something, or will they resent the fact that I'm saying something? And everybody's different, and a lot of times it depends on how I say it, and the way I say it, the words that I use. Person shouldn't feel being put down, and there's a mitzvah to help another Jew. Help another Jew means not only food, not only clothing, not only money, could also be giving them moral support. It could also be giving them spiritual support. So of course it's a positive thing. But we have to know, what the situation is. In each situation is different. It's very hard to give a blanket statement. This is what you should always do. So the next Maimon we're going to learn is a Maimon from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Don't have that in English. So again, we'll have to work with the Hebrew. But it's a little bit of a different subject. It's a Maimon that is focused on davening and different aspects of davening. With that, we'll start that tomorrow. It's a shame. Okay, new Maimon.
A question about the eating. We learned in everybody else class that even if you eat pig during like gluttony circumstances, you still get like spiritual insensitivity to eating it. Like during the Holocaust, like there was like a group that said that wouldn't eat the pig meat because they were like, we don't want to like get the negative.
Right.
If it's a test, are you able to